Europe. Not really a body, but you might say a torso. A human being without eyes, without legs, without arms. A torso which cannot see or hear or move, but where the heart still is beating and the brain is still functioning. And this is that boy. That was sent off to war. And the whole novel is about, you can read the novel in one evening. And the novel is really about him lying on this hospital bed and his thoughts, his memories of what his life was like before, and he cannot communicate with the outside world. And it's about his thoughts and about his attempts to develop a way of communicating somehow with the outside world. And he does with a nurse with whom he develops this method of communicating with her. And then they bring in the generals to see this phenomenon, this torso that can communicate. And they're going to pin medals on his chest. And they're around him, and they ask this question of him, which the nurse communicates to him through this special kind of Morse code that they have. And they ask an odd question. What do you want? And his reply, is a reply that should be reprinted everywhere. What do I want? Aside from the fact he says, I want to talk, I want to walk, I want to listen to music. These are the things I want, but I want something else. He says, I want you to bring me into all the schoolrooms of the country and put me on the desk in front of all these children and say, this is war. Well, so I became an anti-war person. How could I not, after reading that book and after learning something about World War I? And then I was reading about fascism in Europe, and reading about Mussolini in Italy and Hitler in Germany, and reading about the Spanish Civil War and Franco and fascism, and then the war began. World War II began, and that powerful anti-war feeling that I had developed was pushed aside in the glow of this idealist war against fascism. This was a good war. And as you know, we still know this, that World War II is still the good war. There's no war in our history that has a more powerful aura of goodness around it than World War II. You will not find too many people criticizing World War II or challenging the rightness, the goodness of World War II. I mean, and certainly I didn't. The war against fascism. I mean, what could be worse than the evil of fascism. And so I volunteered for the Air Force, and I flew bombing missions in Europe, bombed various cities in Europe. I was an enthusiastic bombardier, and didn't question anything I was doing. And only later, when I was thinking about it, I realized that I'd gone through a certain psychological process which still operates today on the question of war. And the psychological process was this: there are bad guys out there. We are the good guys. And once you've made a decision that they are the bad guys and you are the good guys, then you don't question anything you do. You don't have to think anymore. You just have to make that one simple decision, and then no more questions. Then you can bomb Hiroshima and you can bomb Nagasaki. You can bomb Tokyo and kill 100,000 people in one night. You can bomb Dresden and kill, we don't know how many people, 50,000, 100,000, we don't know. You can kill 600,000 German civilians in the course of World War II, and roughly the same number, about 600,000 Japanese civilians in World War II, and it's all okay, because they are the bad guys and you are the good guys. And you don't even stop to ask the question, these 600,000 civilians who died, whether in Germany or Japan, were they bad guys? But I didn't think about any of that when I was dropping bombs. There was a guy on another crew with whom I developed a friendly relationship. I guess we became friends because we both in our spare time were reading books, which not everybody in the Air Force did. But we'd read books. And so we shared our literary interests, you say. And he was a gunner on another crew. He was an enlisted man. I was an officer. But in the Air Force, the lines between officers and enlisted men were not as stringent as they were very often. And besides, in combat, generally, the lines were blurred. But we became friends. And one day he said to me, "You realize that we are fighting in an imperialist war?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "of course the fascists, they are the worst." He says, "But you think that England and the United States and Soviet Russia are fighting this war for great ideals? Did the United States go to war because Hitler was killing Jews, or did the United States go to war because one of its colonies was attacked by the Japanese? Did England and France go to war for humanitarian reasons, or did they go to war because of the encroachment of this powerful German entity on the British Empire and the French Empire and the Dutch Empire?" Well, I argued with him. I didn't believe him. I didn't accept what he said. But something in what he said must have stayed with me, because after the war, I thought about that. It was not until after the war, after I went home, and I do remember that when I was discharged from the Air Force, I put my sort of mementos, my navigation logs and my little stuff in a folder, and I marked it almost without thinking. Never again. And after I wrote that down, I was surprised at what I had done, because this was the good war. And I've been doing for years now a lot of talking around the country and lecturing and talking to my classes when I was teaching.